Interesting times call for interesting adventure sports podcast episodes. Today's interview is really just a conversation between Dan Vincent and I. You know him from Monkii, the home workout equipment that's really popular these days with the gym being closed, and also from the Live Wild or Die podcast. He interviewed me a couple weeks ago, if you remember, and had a great conversation. We decided to record again. We're both, stuck at home, and we both have podcasting equipment. Decided to just record what we thought about what's going on, our reflection about the situation and what it can teach us, what the overall changes to society might be, and all overall changes to the world of adventure, and what adventure has taught us about dealing with stuff like this. I do want to say from the outset, we are trying to maintain a positive, what can we learn from this attitude and approach. But if you are really going through it right now because of the virus, I do not want to undermine that and want to think that everything's just hunky-dory and that we can all learn a lesson from this, because you can't get around the fact that millions of people are really struggling through this. And if you're one of those people, my heart goes out to you, and I really want to help you in any way I can. My wife and I are definitely supporting the restaurants that we've been supporting, the school board, the school systems around here with food, and helping in any way we can. And we want to do that with this community. So if you are struggling, I do not want you to think this conversation is trying to just undermine that or, think that it's not a big deal for folks, because we know it is. Dan and I are just trying to be optimists, and we are optimists, and we're trying to be positive. And so I hope you learn something. I hope you can maintain a healthy, positive perspective. But again, it's just very scary for a lot of people. So anyway, a lot of people want to keep a sense of normalcy right now, and that's great. To me, when histories happen, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about, history in the making. And so this is historical. This is going to change the world as we know it. This is going to change the world of adventure and adventure sports. So our conversation just kind of goes all over the place about that. And if you don't enjoy this setting, no worries. We're going back to totally normal episodes on Monday, but just thought we'd mix it up a little bit and talk about some current events. But anyway, hope you enjoy and learn something, and stay safe out there, and we'll all get through this. And I would love to talk about just kind of, what it's been like, what this is going to mean, and also what adventure and maybe even training, like what committing to something like that has taught us about dealing with situations like this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Just because I do feel like there's a lot of overlap. Like honestly, I'm looking at, when this was coming, I don't know, not said I was early on or something, but just I was thinking about it like, oh man, this could be bad. I should start preparing. You should probably hear my son right now. He's crying. I'm trying to keep it down. I've got like my little soundproof, pretty much blankets making a thing around my desk. So
sure. No, don't worry about it, man.
Okay. But no, it's just the things that started coming to my mind are the things that it felt like a similar mindset as to when, I got a flat tire or something, or I got hurt out in the woods, and it's like, okay, what do I do? Probably a month or two ago, I got stuck in the snow up in the mountains in my truck, and I was all alone, and it was like in the middle of the night, and this blizzard was coming in, and I was like, all right, don't panic. What do I do? Like, where do I go? What do I have with me? And I literally had a hammer in the back of my truck and just started digging myself out. So I dug like a foot down in the snow till I found some rocks, and then just piled a bunch of rocks under the tires and got out, because even my four-wheel drive, I was stuck. And it was freezing, man. And I was like, and the wind was just whipping, and holy crap, I could be stuck here for a while. I was really out there, and got out and got home, but it was just, okay, I feel like all this training from adventure kind of helps in those situations,
Oh, for sure, man. Well, it's the problem-solving mindset,
Definitely.
But yeah, I think, honestly, man, let's just keep flowing.
Sure.
Let's just keep flowing.
Yeah, so what's the experience been like for y'all so far? I mean, I know we were still early on. It could end really quickly, or it could continue for a while. How has it been for y'all so far?
I mean, honestly, I'm actually at the Monkii office right now because there's basically, I have a small office in this warehouse, so it's not like there's basically zero or minimal contact with other people. So it's a very low risk situation. So for me, it hasn't been, a big deal. It's certainly harder on Anna, my wife, because she's at home with Henley, our daughter, and it's just, she was going to all these play dates and going to the museum. She was out doing stuff all the time with her, and now it's just, especially with the weather, man, that was hard when that snow came through last week.
That was rough.
Overall, we're positive. We're in the process of building a house, so it's a little, just who knows what's going to happen with the housing market and all that. So that's just an unknown that's out of our control that we'll deal with down the road. But
well, let me ask you this: with a big move like that, with a big not physical move, but like a big step in life, what's your views on this disrupting it? Like, what's your instinctual reaction, and then what's your kind of long-term view of it? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure. Well, it's funny asking people. Everyone I think starts with this. Oh, it'll be fine. Especially people that are incentivized, by a certain situation. So if you're a real estate agent, you're going to say it's fine.
Right.
But I think there's a lot. I think as humans, we just have a hard time seeing these large systems. And I just think I'm a very optimistic person in general, but I'm trying to be more realistic for this particular situation. So, I just think there's going to be long-term consequences, but I don't know exactly what they are, which is unfortunate because that doesn't really help many people.
What's your feeling towards it? Is it optimism or is it anxiety?
I think overall things are going to work out for everyone. I think certain people are definitely getting hit harder than others, especially if you work at like a restaurant or any sort of service industry, it's just, and I can't imagine, on the adventure side, if you're a guide or, you have these trips planned for this upcoming summer, I mean, that could almost get wiped out completely,
Yeah. You wouldn't think about it being out there, but like I know some friends that were going to do the AT this year, and like the Appalachian Mountain Club or whatever it's called, the AMC, said no one should hike the trail right now. And you wouldn't think that, but there's a ton of physical interaction, or not, just close interaction along a real popular hiking trail. So all these thru hikers are pushing back their ventures they're physically doing out in the woods months and months, and I can't imagine for folks that are actually doing it for business.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, it's funny because I said to Anna, I said, hey, if we didn't have, we're having another baby in May. If we didn't have another baby coming and, we're fulfilling Kickstarter right now, if we didn't have all that, we should just go on like a thru hike. But then I think Outside Magazine posted something and I thought about it. It's like you could serve as this vector hopping from town to town, I retract my previous statement.
Man, I know it has been tempting. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, holy cow, we got a month before you go back to teaching, or we'll see if you even go back. Let's go somewhere. Gas is like $1.50 a gallon all over the country. But then it is, the reason we have this opportunity is not a good reason. And so You don't want to be a vector, and you don't want to be, it does feel selfish, but you also think like, oh, I'm not going to have this opportunity again. So
right.
Man, you guys are having a baby here soon. What's your feelings around that? I'm sure that has caused you to think a little differently about the next few months.
Yeah, to answer your previous question, I'm overall positive. I think there's going to be, I think people are just kind of calm. It reminds me of also of like the 50s in a way. It's like the 50s with smartphones right now. Everyone's out walking, talking to their neighbors. People seem to be friendlier in general, all that. And I actually had to take Henley to get some vaccinations earlier this week, and the hospital was empty. And talking to the doctors there, it's been pretty mellow. I didn't think that this is in Boulder. There were not any cases at this specific hospital. And yeah, they said, just kind of don't worry about it. And so I'm excited. I think too, with the seasons changing, I suspect that will help calm things down a little bit if what I've read is true, but I would fact check me for sure on that. But yeah, it'll be an interesting time being born into this situation. You know, the bummer is, you know, family and friends. You know, if there's still kind of a quarantine going on, then we're all alone in our little prison that's our house. You know, that's the best thing about having a kid is all the people you get to bring around it. So hopefully it can be calmed down enough to not get in the way of that.
But you're not worried at all about physically having the child so young and you're home. You know what I mean? Just, it's scary having a kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, I can't imagine when kids are born in, you know, these situations, you know, whether war is going on or uncertainty politically or, you know, all around the world, stuff's happening all the time. Of course, this is nothing new, but I mean, there's never been something so big. Someone said today, actually, was listening to a podcast, and it said, like, this is the biggest social experiment of all time.
Okay.
1.5 billion people were told to stay home for the next few weeks, like around the world, through their local governments and whatnot. Other things have affected the whole world, but never has the world been so big. So 1.5 billion people is probably the most people ever been involved in one situation together. And then obviously the whole world is affected, even if they're not staying home. So it's like, wow, this is a big deal. This is a big event, you know?
Yeah. It's and it's hard to recognize that, I think, when you're living in it, you know, because you're in your own little world. But yeah, I guess I've been really into stoicism the last year. And, you know, it's just, we're doing what's in our control, Anna and I, as far as just, you know, we're trying to really honor the quarantine and stay healthy. And, yeah, we'll do our best and deal with problems as they arise. But you know, the other thing too is, man, like if there was a ton of young kids going in the hospitals and if it was a kid-centric disease, I would certainly have a different attitude. But the fact it just seems to be focused on older and populations that are immune compromised, it gives me less worry, I'll say.
Yeah, and I'd say I don't want to sound cold-hearted, but I feel like that's better than if it was affecting children and infants even. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a dad right now and young dad just like you, and I just can't imagine, you know, those folks being like, I mean, the thing, we think it's the worst situation possible. You know, a lot of people are saying that, you know, the news is just the sky is falling all the time. So this is, for once, feels like something worth covering. I mean, I watch the news. Every graphic, every headline is in bold red and crazy just negativity. And, you know, they're trying to grab your attention. There's a lot of news going on. But all that to say, I mean, think of how much worse it would be if the script was flipped and it was affecting 0 to 10-year-olds at an accelerated rate. I mean, it would be awful. It would be so much worse, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like I said, I think my attitude would be completely different. You know, we'd probably move to like the middle of Wyoming or something to get away. You know, I'd really shelter in place. So, but what about you, man? What's your kind of short and long-term outlook?
Man, that's a good question. Cause you know, you always have an initial reaction to something. We were just talking about this yesterday. Somebody was bothering me. Not bothering me, but someone sent an email or something that was just getting to me. And Emily's like, well, you can't affect your instinctual reaction to things. You know, that's kind of instinctual. And you really can only affect your long-term reaction to things because then you have a choice in there at some point. And I've been thinking about that the last, 24 hours really. And it's like, you know, treating this situation like that, instinctual reaction, you know, maybe a little fear, a little like, oh gosh, what is this? But long-term, I don't know. I think it can be a really good thing, you know. I hear a lot of adventures on our show talk about kind of the concept of not letting tragedy or not letting a challenge go to waste or some sort of setback go to waste because it's a huge learning opportunity. It can be a pivotal moment. Like, how many people have you talked to through Monkii and, of course, you know, through the podcast and just through knowing people that some big event in their life was a turning point? You know what I mean? A lot of people don't get healthy until there's a health scare. They don't take life serious until it's threatened in some way. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so with something like this, I feel like it's a huge opportunity for the majority of people, literally, I mean, almost every person in America everyone is affected by this in some way, unless they're just, a nomad way out in the middle of Mongolia or something and don't check anything ever for years at a time. And so, I think for most of us not going to get this and not going to, physically be, our health is going to be okay for the vast majority of us, even at the worst case scenario. You know what I'm saying? Like, most people are going to make it through this and be fine. And, we're just all taking super precautions right now as a society, which is great. And I think it's great that we're supporting our most vulnerable in that way. But it's a huge opportunity for us to just reevaluate what's important. I don't know about you, but holy cow, all these goals I had this year are all of a sudden out the window. They're totally out of my control, like either events or adventures or just plans. You got this graph, you're on this track, whether it's finances or, building your house or plans of all sorts, and it's just disrupted all of a sudden. And I just think it's good to know that can just happen at any time, and you really do need to take advantage of every day. Like, I guess I've been looking at my family different this week. Like, wow, it's just cool to be here. You know what I mean? It's just cool to just sit here and sit in our house, open the curtains, and let the sun come in and just sit. That's really the most important thing I can be doing right now, because so many other things are out of my control, and it takes something like this to maybe realize that again. And it's like a societal crisis. I don't know if you remember, but remember after 9/11 how, I don't know, I just remember the world being obviously just a huge, horrible situation, but I just remember everyone at school, I was in school at the time, and my parents, my community was just so loving, so caring, so compassionate towards people. And it was almost like that effect lasted much longer than the event itself, and ended up being a very positive experience for a lot of people because they just reevaluated their lives after that. So I think this is going to be the same,
Well, you brought up a lot of good points there. I was going to say there's like this groundedness, or people seem more grounded walking around with, and it does remind me a little bit of post 9/11. I think I was a sophomore in high school, so I was like 15. I was 16, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, everyone seems grounded. I'm talking to my neighbor. There's neighbors I've talked to that I've literally never even seen before. They live 2 or 3 houses down. It's crazy. And yeah, it does really, put things in perspective. I'm usually, I'd be bummed if I was just stuck inside, but the fact that you're kind of forced to be, or at least forced to stay away from others appropriately, I'm just shifting my mindset to enjoying it, spending more time with Anna and Henley, and just making the best of the situation. So for me, that's, doing a lot of home workout stuff. And it's been cool too, to kind of rally behind the Monkii community and the Monkii family. And just, it's been crazy seeing how many people all of a sudden are getting out their gear. Maybe they haven't been using it for a while. And just in general, the nation kind of embracing fitness, it's a really positive outcome of this. Like you were saying, I agree. I think there's a lot of positives, and I think that it's just a good reality check, and reminds you what is really important. And hopefully, as a nation and as a world, there's going to be a lot more good than bad that comes out of it. Anna actually mentioned, she wants to see like satellite photos of like pre coronavirus, post corona, or I guess pre coronavirus, quarantine, post coronavirus, as far as like pollution in the air and stuff like that. So,
oh yeah, it's been huge. Have you seen some of them?
I did that. Those exist?
Yeah, there's actually been a lot of coverage of it. Like, it started with China, because China's such a big polluter, huge manufacturing. It showed some satellite imagery from NASA of pollution, and it's just, it looks like literally cloud coverage versus a clear blue sky. And, I don't know what exactly it's measuring, just carbon output. But okay. I don't know how but it looks like a radar, like weather. And it's literally, all you see is red. Then all you see is just the country, the outline of the country. It's like totally non-existent, the pollution itself. And so that definitely is a benefit right now. In the same way Italy, because they're, poor poor Italy, they're getting hit hard, and
Right.
definitely don't want to undermine the effect it's having on the families and the people that are dying from it. That's horribly awful. But it was a story. I don't know. There's so many things like this that have happened in history. I don't know if you remember. I might be getting all this wrong. I'm no historical person, but I think it was the Black Plague that was in England that was killing so many people, and it was transmitted by rats and just filth, and London was just a horribly disgusting city. And it caught fire because every crevice and nook was filled with trash and waste and like broken sticks and just hay and just garbage. And the whole city just burned to the ground. And it also, in correlation, helped eliminate the plague, because part of the reason that it was continuing, because the amount of filth just never ceased. The river. The river was filthy. Everything was just filthy, and these rats just thrived. And when their habitat was destroyed through this fire, it cleansed the city. And so a lot of folks look back on it and say, if that hadn't happened, the problem would just continued. One really knew that that's why it was happening. At that time, it's spirits or whatever that are causing you to get sick. Or
Right.
I'm no expert, so don't quote me on that. But I just remember reading that. I think it was in college or high school or something, and just always thinking like, you don't want to think about awful things in that way, but sometimes it is a cleansing of the mind and soul and of a society. And I don't know, something like this, man. I just think it's going to be a pre and post coronavirus world. I think everything's going to be different now.
For sure.
In what ways? I don't know.
Yeah, man. I think it's a cool. Well, I wrote this down while you were talking. You brought up a really good point, but to me, it's a really good reminder or an example of how you can slow down, do less, consume less, and still be really happy and content, and just enjoy the simple, small things in every day. That's
yeah.
It's super easy to get lost, whether even if you're a hardcore adventurer, in Boulder, there's like this, it's kind of like, adventure is like a sport. Well, adventures are sports, but it's almost beyond that in Boulder, where it's adventure's highly competitive. And then you'll see this guy did this run or climb this thing, so you want to climb harder type of thing. And, it's nice to take a step back from that and just, again, enjoy to have the time that we do have, and see that it's okay to slow down and you're still going to be happy and healthy.
Wow. Yeah, man, I totally get that. You said like adventure's a competition.
Right.
Like, oh, this guy got the fastest known time on this mountain or this route, and now I got to go for it. But I will say, I don't know about you, but when I go on an adventure, I immediately get incredibly thankful for the smallest luxury or the smallest like break. And so, after a hard day of riding or hiking, it's like that evening stroll. By the end of the day, the through hike, it's like by the time it's, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock and the sun, there starts getting that golden hour and the scenery's gorgeous, and you find a campsite, and it's just like that cup of tea or coffee and that meal is just so good. And that it's just such a relaxing, incredible experience. And then when you get back from adventure, it's almost like you're just see everything in a whole new light. Like running water is amazing, like a fresh cup of coffee anytime you want is just awesome. Having, a steak or whatever it is just like, holy cow, I can't believe I'm having this steak right now. And I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like that right now. Like, okay, we do need to just be more conscious about everything we do. Where we go, if we drive somewhere, be conscious about the gas you're using, be conscious about, the amount of food we're eating, or what I mean? Just not endlessly consuming as just a way to fill some sort of void, but like being very intentional and not being so wasteful right now, because you just never know what's going to happen. And I think that has an incredible effect on people,
Absolutely.
I feel like it's kind of like tough love. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need this as a society. I feel like we need a kick in the pants saying, you can't just head endlessly in this direction of consumerism, of progress, of the graph going up and to the right all the time. You can't just rely on growth all the time. It's a finite world. It's finite resources. It's finite time. It's finite money. You know what I mean? And so I think this is going to cause people to just take a step back and relay what's important.
Absolutely, man. One thing I actually wanted to ask you about is what you're reading, but I've been reading these books lately, and I keep seeing this topic coming up over and over and over, and distilled down to like 2.5 words. Essentially, it's struggle equals purpose. And, I think our generation, I'm 34. It always takes me a second to think about that now. I'm in the 30s, but I'm 34. And, we've never, at least I guess I went through 9/11, but it was so, I was in California. That happened in New York. It was so far removed. And I think I was still young enough at the time where it wasn't as visceral as this, where it's literally happening here and now in my community and state. So we haven't had this struggle. We've had it very well and very good since pretty much our whole lives. So if you compare that to most of human history, that's not how it's been, and nor is that really what we evolved from. So I really think that struggle does create purpose. And like you said, getting this kind of setback and this opportunity to kind of reevaluate and see how that's actually true will hopefully change a lot of things. So,
yeah, you're right. It is here and now. I don't know about you, man, but I think this might be horrible to say, but I feel like adventure has led me to this mindset. I think I'd rather live in interesting times than not, in whatever struggles that brings. In a way, like I don't want to. The part of me doesn't want to go through stuff. The other part of me is like, you know for a fact that's the only way you grow, and that's the only way. Like, what are you doing here on Earth if you're not here to experience the human experience? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't know. I've taken a lot of pride through trips, like just being able to understand what people are going through. And I don't know, I'm pretty open about this on my show, but I went through a pretty serious depression a few years ago, and I never want to go through something like that again. But I'm really glad it happened, because now anyone that talks to me about that, I can just totally relate. You know what I mean? And just offer from a perspective of experience, hey, it's going to be all right. It does pass. You do get through it. There are ways to deal with it if it's something that you deal with for a long time. And I don't know, just going through challenges. I love being able to be relatable. And I talked about this on my show on Thursday. My grandmother went through the Great Depression. She just died last year, and she lived her whole childhood through the Great Depression, and she was pretty old. And I just asked her about it all the time, like, what was that like? She's like, well, like I learned not to waste. I learned how to be relatable to people. I learned all these skills going through that. Man, I wish I could go through something like that. Like that sounds really stupid. Don't get me wrong.
No, man.
You know what I'm saying? It's like the people that go through it, there's something about them that is different than the people who never have to go through anything.
Well, build character. And, I think what you're making me think is, or what I wanted to ask you hearing that is, do you think, I'm going to say modern adventure sports or how we kind of go about adventure in this modern day, is that in a way to create this struggle that you're talking about? Like, are we seeking out these hard, difficult experiences as a way to kind of fill that void? Because it's not, you could go through your life and never leave your house and just sit on the couch because you can get everything delivered, right? You literally don't have to struggle at all. Oh,
definitely. It's filling an instinctual void, I think. You know what I mean? Like we train for what? For competitions, for Ironmans, for marathons, for whatever it is. It's filling a void. It's filling, I think, a biological void that folks that struggle don't need to fill. I've seen some pretty poverty-stricken areas in the world, some pretty extreme poverty and stuff. Never had to go through anything like that. But, I remember telling my grandma, first of all, that we lived through the Great Depression, like, hey, I want to bike from Alaska to Florida. She's like, why in the world would you want to do that? It's voluntary struggle. And we are in a position of privilege to take on stuff like that. And I think all this effort we put towards it, towards exercising, towards achieving goals does fill some sort of void. I hear from a lot of people on the podcast that like when their body no longer allows them to do adventures, they fill that void through really focusing on work and projects and pushing the envelope in other ways. And, I definitely think you're right. So going through something like this, I feel like, I don't know, we can put those skills that we've learned through our pursuits and adventure sports to practice and stuff like this. But for folks that go through it naturally, I don't know. I feel like it's just there. They don't need to manufacture it.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's, David, who's, Monkii co-founder. He was in the Peace Corps over in Ethiopia.
Oh man.
And, I actually went and visited. I went and stayed there for about a month. It was awesome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Amazing people. The food, man. If anyone listening to this, if you've never had Ethiopian food, once we get through coronavirus, that's the first restaurant you should go to. It's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I spent a lot of time in Uganda, so not too far at all.
Okay.
But so what about it? How did that?
Well, it just, it was interesting when I went over to visit, and we, at the time I was 24, 25. And at the time it was one of those things where, we're like trying to go climb mountains and do all this adventure stuff. And people they didn't understand why we want to, like, even camping was like, why would you guys want to go sleep on the dirt? Because for a lot of people, that was just life. There was no novelty to it. It was just how they lived. So it was, it's interesting to see how affluence leads to seek these challenging pursuits, or at least these more minimalist, situations like backpacking or long distance bike riding or things like that wouldn't necessarily be sought out in cultures that tend to struggle more. I don't think it's a negative thing necessarily. I think it's more of a reflection of something that's natural, that's missing, or at least that we evolved with, right? And again, the simplest word I can use is just struggle, whether that was getting food, getting water, having to go to war. Not that I think going to war is a horrible thing. I wouldn't want that for anyone. But again, what these different things did was they banded people together, created these really tight communities, and that gave people purpose. So I think that's where, like you were mentioning, if someone's quite wealthy and maybe they're lacking, whether it's maybe they don't have a good relationship with their family, or maybe they're lacking that struggle, or they're not finding purpose, they're doing these extremely difficult things, which I've never done an Ironman. I don't know if I ever will, but that's for sure super freaking hard. And I can see how they can derive some of that missing stimulus into their life.
Yeah, I think it does fill that. I think it fills that void. It's for them. For me, I like to stick on the more wilderness-based stuff. And I don't know about you, but when I get out there and really get into an experience, it's like I shed this civilized life, you know what I mean? And I can kind of respond to things a little more instinctually. And I do feel a little more wild. Like it's like, especially through hiking or through, bike touring, it's find water. I need to find water. Like I'm almost out. I got like half a liter left, and, I need to that is a, very basic human need and biological need. And it's like, I got to find water within the next few hours. I never have to even thinking about that throughout my day. Like I literally have a sink 10 feet away from me, from my desk, that I can just fill up my bottle anytime. And you know what I mean? It breaks it down to these survival instincts. And I think just for our really high strung, overworked minds, it's such a good and positive thing. And so I'm hoping that this whole coronavirus experience helps people realize that those basic needs, they are important because they can be disrupted. You know what I mean? There's with supply chain and whatnot, there's a real chance that food might be in short supply for periods, you know what I mean? Depending on how things get disrupted and people hoarding, you know what I mean? I know you were talking about on your show last week, don't panic buy, but
right.
My grandmother and grandfather who lived through that lived their entire lives from that point on extremely modestly and extremely frugally. They paid cash for everything. Their house, I think they built their brick home for $12,000, and it's still there. Like my aunt lives in it now, and
Oh, nice.
you know what I mean. They built it. It's right there. It's on 2 acres, beautiful piece of land, and they lived an extremely simple life, but a very fulfilling life, very rewarding life, and they're very happy. They both are passed away now. But I remember my grandfather he grew an acre worth of food every year, and I didn't know this until long after he had passed, but my grandmother told me a few years ago. She was like, well, your grandfather would grow this acre of food, and he would split the harvest into 2. He would keep half for us and give away the other half at church. He would take it to the community and find people that needed it. He would take the best half and give it away to people. And just asking her about, why did he do that? She's like, well, when you go through really hard times, you have a choice to make it about you or to make it about helping those around you get through it. And she goes, I just think our life kind of led us to focus on helping others. And they would never obviously talk about it. If he had an Instagram, he'd never post it to his story and tell you he's giving away half an acre of food to people. But he was doing it. And I don't know. I just think we could use more of that realization that not all this is guaranteed and not all this is important. And what is important and what makes you the most happy is just as abundant in times of prosperity as it is in challenging times like now. You know what I mean? The same things that are going to make you the most happy then are going to make you the most happy now. They're all free, they're all abundant, and they're all right in front of your face.
For sure. And the silver lining, I have seen various people, I think I've seen a few things on Facebook or a few different news outlets where there are these groups of people organizing to help those that are a little bit higher risk, to go to the grocery store for them, or just mow their lawn, do whatever they need to do to just help people out. So that has been super inspiring and encouraging to see. And I just read this book. It's called Sapiens. I'd highly recommend it. But he talks about how kind of basically the agricultural revolution shifted kind of the collective human mindset to focusing on the future. So you had to think, if you were a farmer, you had to think about the crops for next year and the year after that and how you're going to plan for all these things. And hearing you talk about when you're through hiking or on a long bike tour or whatever it is, your attention becomes more immediate. Where do I get food? Where am I going to sleep tonight? All these different things. And I remember when I was doing the John Muir Trail, that was it was like peeling back these layers. You just felt wilder. You were more animalistic in a way, but it was a very,
yeah, it's like a werewolf transition.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll post the pictures of me post hike.
I bet.
Oh man, but yeah, it's such a grounding, cleansing experience, and then I remember it was the weirdest thing, hitting the pavement at the Whitney portal, and all of a sudden it's like, you snap out of it, and it took me probably a week to feel, I don't even know if feel normal is the right word, but I guess readjust. And I felt so good out there on the trail. And the thing I noticed the most is, well, one, I really miss my wife, and she was pregnant at the time. This was I called this the pre-baby spirit quest. It was my John Muir Trail hike. But, I really missed her and was really excited to meet our daughter. We didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but I noticed I wasn't ruminating on the future much, if any at all. I was very present, very in the moment. And I think a lot of people don't get opportunities like that now.
Yeah, absolutely not. That's a great reflection, man, because I don't know about you, but those times where I am living really in the moment, really in that day, I'm probably the happiest. Now, I'd say probably the least happiest era I've ever been, just overall. nothing like wrong necessarily, but I'm also in conjunction with that thinking about the future more than I ever have. And
Right.
so I wonder if that's correlated.
I think so. I mean, to me, it makes total sense where, the human, I've really gotten into evolution as well the last several months. But if you think about just what human life was like pre kind of 10,000 years ago or even 5,000 years ago, it was very immediate. You didn't really have to think that far ahead. And now we're thinking weeks, months, years, decades ahead. Like my retirement fund, what's that going to look like when I'm 65? All this stuff, and it's I think we're starting to kind of max out on that from a bandwidth and a capacity size. So yeah, it's I feel you, man. What I've been wanting to ask you this. I mean, and feel free, we can always talk about it later on a different episode. But you talked about I've heard you mention it, the depression you went through. Do you think that was caused by thinking about the future or being in this situation where all of a sudden you have a mortgage or all these different things? Any catalyst for that specifically, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. Or good question. Yeah, I don't know. I tell my wife all the time. It was like right when we got married, I got pretty depressed. She's like, "Of course, it was my fault."
Oh,
No, but it was just it was a kind of just crossover of a lot of different things. I've always been a very frugal person, very cheap. And so money stresses me out when we have to spend it for whatever reason. Obviously, you got to spend money on things. And so that is something. We had some big expenses pop up. We had just gotten married, whole new city. It was winter time. We both had never really gone through a real winter, and it was fairly cold winter here in Denver. But just, I don't know, I think it was overall a feeling of being trapped in a situation, just in a number of different ways, and just didn't know how to handle it. I'd never gone through a depression before, or really had many bad days in a row. I was a pretty happy person, but spiritually stuff was changing. Just a lot of unknown territory, and
sure.
I think that was kind of scary. But I'll tell people this, if anyone's going through it, even looking back, I obviously I journaled and wrote about it, and saw it different treatments, and it lasted a good year and a half consistently, and still it's something I got to deal with. It's almost like I feel that depression hit me like a car. Like it was like I was riding my bike down the road and a car hit me. And then all of a sudden, I now have all these things I got to deal with, like a broken leg, you know what I mean? A collapsed lung, and all that takes recovery and time. So it's definitely a pre and post person when something like that happens to you. I definitely feel like there was a pre-depression Mason, and now there's a post-depression Mason, and it's totally different. Totally different mindset. I will say I do practice a lot of mindfulness where I try to look at myself from a third person perspective, like, wow, this is an interesting situation. Try not to change it, but just feel it. Feel like, this is how I feel now. This is kind of my new reality. What does this mean? Why does this happen? What should I do about it? And so I will say I really don't feel like I made a choice or picked up vices or did anything to bring this on. I just literally felt one day I got hit by a truck, and then it was just, what do I do with this? You know what I'm saying? That's how it felt. Right. And I know I just never gone through anything like that. So I will say I look at it differently now with people that are going through things. I'm like, hey, I totally get it. It totally feels like it's out of your hands. Kind of like this whole coronavirus thing. Like a lot of people's futures are at stake, and things have changed for so many people now, and it's 100% out of their hands. And I'm not saying that people don't get themselves into depression or something like that, but for me, it really felt out of my hands. And then it was a matter of my getting out of it was definitely an effort on my end. You know what I mean? I can definitely see how you can just sit in that after it happens. But just like if you were to actually be hit by a car, dealing with it afterwards is kind of in your hands. But there's a lot that you can't change. Maybe your leg doesn't work like it used to, or you have trouble breathing or something. You just never know. Your hands quiver. I don't know. But that's that's kind of the best way I can describe it.
That's honestly one of the best descriptions I've ever heard, man. Thank you.
Oh, hey, yeah. It might be different for you, but that's how it is. That's how it feels.
Sure.
You know, you deal with PTSD from something like that. I'm sure if you were hit or, maybe you were mugged at some point. I had a friend that was mugged in New York or something one time. And it's just like, he deals with that now and it's totally out of his hands. And I'm like, yeah. I wake up sometimes and think, I'm just totally sad right now. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like,
right.
Now I need to work through this. Like, this is what I do in the immediate future right now. And so I don't know. I can't speak on it as an expert. It's just only been a few years, but it's my reflection right now. But so this feels like a similar thing to all of society happening to it. So anyone out there that's dealing with something or this coronavirus is accelerating some sort of effect on depression, I totally get it. And yeah, I don't know. I just want to encourage people. I've had some of my best days since that's happened, but it's definitely something I'm extremely, not extremely, but much more intentional about. You know what I mean? I have to really recognize my attitude spiraling down or up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's not just like I exist now. It's like I need to make a conscious choice on how do I exist.
It's really insightful, and no, I thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
I think we all go through it in some form or fashion.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, to say I haven't. I have certainly not gone through something extended, but there's certainly been acute phases where that feeling of the hit, getting hit by the car. I think that's a very accurate description. So one thing I kind of trying to shift to getting folks a little, turn it to more lighter side, I guess. But one thing I wanted to ask you, man, was, I got to tell you on the air here, like the episode you did with Aaron, what's his last name? The National Geographic.
Oh, Aaron Miller.
Aaron Miller, folks on the Monkii side, check this episode out. I'll link it in the show notes. But I love that episode. And especially the Shinto monks that were doing these long distance kind of active meditations. And essentially it was the Misogi. And, we've been texting and chatting a little bit. It seemed like maybe that interview kind of intrigued that concept of the Misogi a little bit. Not that you weren't doing it already, but it seemed to kind of reignite it in you a little bit. You've done these huge adventures, the Alaska to Florida, I'm totally blanking. What's the bike ride from Canada to Mexico?
The Tour Divide.
Tour Divide, Colorado Trail, all these things, which for most people would be like the Misogi of a lifetime. So it was interesting to me after we'd kind of talked about it, how it was intriguing to you. And I'm curious as to why that specifically was intriguing, because you kind of already were doing these epic things that I would certainly classify as a Misogi. What's exciting about that framework versus just doing an adventure? You know what I mean? Like to me, they're not that different.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of goes back to, I don't know what's so intriguing about certain adventures and what isn't about others. But I will say, I guess to adventure, at least the ones I've done, I've learned that I'm trying to put it into words. With those Misogi guys, like it's all voluntary, of course. Like we put ourselves out there on purpose. But when you do something that involves getting to know other people, like you said, like folks in Boulder, you do adventures and you're trying to, it gets very competitive and very alpha really quickly.
Right.
But
right.
I'd say I'm definitely drawn towards adventures where it's interacting with very, very real people. When you start just learning about people on your journeys, I feel like through hiking is probably a good way to do that too. You intersect with a lot of these towns and you see a lot of these people and you just learn that, I don't know, people have real struggles, and it is a privilege to be out there, and it is a blessing, and you're very thankful and grateful to be there. And so it kind of removes this competitive side of it and fills it with maybe some more important concepts. And so with, Aaron visiting these monks, that were, sitting under waterfalls and doing these long journeys, and he got to sit and talk with one of them. I don't know. I feel like that was very much how some of my experiences have been, sitting and talking. I remember one time, if I can entertain this, I was extremely lonely one day, and like it had been 4 or 5 days since I've talked to another person, and I was like, I still, I've gone through a lot of change spiritually, but I still do pray. But I remember feeling incredibly lonely one time, and I said, I would just love someone to talk to. And I go to the McDonald's somewhere in Massachusetts. I was riding up the East Coast, going across country, and I sit and this guy comes over to me and talks to me, and he's kind of very awkward. I don't know how else to say it. He was challenged in a lot of ways, and so he was extremely loud when he talked to me, and he was just like, "Hey, is that your bicycle outside?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." And he's probably 75, and he goes, "I'm here with my parents." And I was like, "Wow, your parents must be 100." You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he was just, he didn't, I don't think he had very high social awareness, because he was spitting all over my face and standing above me while I was at the table. And this other lady that was sitting I was at a booth. She was in the next booth over. So I was looking at her, but there was a empty booth between us. And she was talking to me too, but she was deaf. And so she was very loud too, because I guess she couldn't regulate her volume. And so she couldn't hear this other guy talking to me, but the guy that was talking to me had no self-awareness to realize someone else was talking. And they were both, older. And then this other guy started talking to me about being a truck driver across country, because he saw my bike. So I had all of a sudden 3 people talking to me at the same time, all incredibly loud. And I was like, okay, enough. Enough. And so it was hilarious. And then so I leave, and a few hours later, I stopped to get some coffee because it was cold and rainy. And I sit down at this, it's like this, I don't even know. It's like where was I? I might have been in Maryland. I might have been near Baltimore or something. I was in this city, and I was drinking coffee, and this older gentleman, very old, asked if he could sit with me. And he was a World War II vet. And
oh, wow.
We sat and probably talked for an hour. He just told me all about his life, all about his experiences. And he showed me on his arm, he had like 4 or 5 bullet holes, like scars where he had been shot in World War II. And I thanked him for his service, and I just was so blown away by this conversation. And it was those 2 experiences, man, were just, it made me, that's what I love about adventure, is not being the fastest at something or being the greatest at something, but being able to really, really connect with people, everyday people, and have these experiences with people that you just don't have a lot of the times otherwise. And so, I don't know, man, I feel like those experiences are really what life is all about. And my style of adventure is kind of built to have as many of those as possible, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be the fastest to bike up the coast or something, because I feel like you miss out on a lot when you do that. But that's just me. If someone else might get that same level of fulfillment from doing it their way, and that's totally understandable.
For sure. Well, honestly, man, that anecdote you just shared, that really reminds me of kind of what we're going through now. Just, again, it's those small interactions that are becoming much more meaningful. And just what hearing you talk about that, for some reason, it was making me think of back when I was a kid, and how you wouldn't really plan, like, playing baseball or soccer or street hockey or whatever. You just kind of went outside and started moving around, and then another kid might come out, and then you'd say, "Hey man, you want to go do this?" And then someone's dad might join in. It was a very organic interaction versus today. Everything, there's like, it's 3 hours of texting to set up like a coffee meeting or something, So
isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well, I think adventure creates a framework for those situations, those
Absolutely.
super small. Yeah.
So what do we do as we get older? How do we increase those kinds of experiences? And, one of the things is that I definitely hold on to spiritually is this thing Jesus talks about of essentially thinking like children. Talks a lot about that. The children enter the kingdom of heaven. And, I think about that a lot. Like, how do I think back like a child? Like you said, you just, let's go play basketball. Then all of a sudden there's a game and it's the greatest time of your life. How do we do that now with our lives? You know what I'm saying? And going through all this, do we dial back the preparing for the future for decades and decades from now?
Right. Well, that's, what you're making me think of is, as a kid, you don't have as many preconceived conceptions. You just kind of take things at face value versus we have so much access to information now, and it's easy to kind of form opinions before you meet someone or do something. And, it seems, I don't have a great answer, frankly, but that seems to be part of the cause is information overload in a way. You know what? I remembered what I wanted to ask about the misogi now, or at least I have a better way to frame it. So what we were talking about is, and you actually brought this up, like how if you can do something, even though it might sound to someone else like, oh my gosh, you're going to kayak from the Bahamas to Florida. That's crazy. If you can do something, or I guess for you, it might be you're going to ride your bike across the country, but if you can do something, it takes away a little bit of the unknown. Whereas like the misogi is more like you're going to do something that I don't know if I can do that, but I want to try, and I think I'll learn a lot in the process. I think that's the difference. And I think, you and I were talking about doing some big climbing and maybe treating that as kind of misogi. So just to clarify for the listeners, I think that was our kind of conclusion between the difference and thus the attraction to the concept.
What's, you have any misogi experiences that are kind of out there for you? Like, I don't know if I could do that.
I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know if I can do. I don't know what, I'm trying to really shift my mindset into like, oh, dang, I'm not out climbing or doing this because we're about to have 2 kids. So I've been pretty modest with my goals for 2020. I've actually just tried to do things that are more executable that I don't know. Like I have some weightlifting goals. I have some running goals. Like I want to see if I can break a certain mile time. I'm going to try to do sub 5 minute, which I think the best I've ever done is like a low, like a 5, I want to say 5:20, 5:23. So that's a pretty ambitious goal, but maybe I get to 5:10 or 5:15. That would still be really fast.
Heck yeah.
Same with weightlifting. I can do that in my garage. There's some gymnastics exercise, so that's kind of, they're misogis in a different way, I guess, for me. So instead of traditionally for me, it's always been these, a big climb, a big run, a long hike, things like that. Whereas now I'm a little more interested in these things that they're still unknowns, but they're just they fit into my current state of life a little bit more. And I've really gotten into bow hunting as well. I really enjoy shooting a bow. Is extremely enjoyable, fun. And I love being out. I've hunted 3 seasons previously. The first one was in 2010, and then it was a big gap until 2018. But there's something about being out in the woods with the hunter's mindset, and you see the world in a whole different way, which I don't know if that's necessarily misogi, but it activates a part of my brain I didn't even know was there. So I've really enjoyed that. I really enjoy the process of bringing something back. I feel like sometimes if I leave my wife and kid and go do something all day that was, maybe climbing or going on a big run, I don't necessarily bring something back versus with the hunting, you share. It's like I think it was your uncle that shared his crop. You're sharing the bounty of your harvest. So I do really enjoy that aspect of it as well.
Dude, I had no idea you hunted. That's awesome.
Everyone says that. I need to get a haircut or something.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I can totally see it now, but I don't know. There's just a lot of people don't today. That's how I got in the outdoors was hunting and bow hunting too. My dad, I still have a bow, and talk about it fulfilling an instinctual need, an instinctual desire is going out hunting something, especially with a bow and arrow, and bringing it back. I mean, that's pretty incredible. I know hunting gets a lot of flack in a lot of today's world, but if you're going to harvest meat or anything, I think that's the most rewarding and the most fair way to do it, and also the most the reflective way to do it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't. It's relatively. I don't want to bash on rifle hunters because I think there's a lot of. I'd say most hunters in general, whether you are a bow hunter, rifle hunter, are very good people, grounded people, and they really care about the animals and the environment possibly more than people that don't hunt. But yeah, I mean, it takes work and there's a process to it. It's not something, it's earned, I guess. Back to my theme, it's struggle that you have to earn your harvest. So, well, maybe we should end on that, and maybe we'll have to do a bow hunting specific episode here soon.
I'll have to interview.
Or we should get out
I could
this
interview
fall.
you on bow hunting. Honestly, I'd love to.
Well, I don't know if I'm. There's certainly people that would probably be much more knowledgeable, but it'd be certainly be fun to talk about.
Well, that's what it's all about, man. There's always someone more knowledgeable. I mean, heck,
right.
You didn't have to. I mean, there's way more people that know more about everything that I know a lot about. A lot more people know a lot more. So that's besides the point. Yeah, you'd be great, but yeah, man. That's. Is this what you were hoping? I mean, I feel like I've been all over the place.
Yeah. Well, you know what, man? Like, I mean, by the way, I wanted to mention I really enjoyed the monologue you did last week. But yeah, I really like one of the podcasts I listen to most is Joe Rogan's, and I really appreciate how it's conversational, and I think you and I, every time we've hung out, we've always had these really insightful conversations, and so I think I wanted to try and keep it that way because it's just I think the message gets out much more clear and the thought process becomes more clear. So yeah, I think the Monkees are going to really enjoy, and I hope your audience does as well.
Well, cool, man. Well, Dan, thanks so much, man. And yeah, let me know if you need anything else.
All right, my man. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to do this.
Heck yeah.
All right. We'll talk soon, brother.
Take care, my man.
All right. Bye. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.